Hello everyone, welcome to Tuesday Tea Time with Elsa, and we have Cleo right here, and we have Myrna behind me. I was today talking about emotional maturity in horses, and I think that applies to emotional maturity in humans too. I find this subject really fascinating because when I first filmed Taming Wild, I believed all horses wanted harmony and flow and peace. Hi, Cleo. Kristen says hi to you too. Yes. Hi. Since filming the first movie, I have realized that the desire for flow and harmony is dependent a little bit on emotional maturity. And so my mares here, Cleo and Myrna, are fairly emotionally mature, which means they crave peace and harmony. And that means that my job training them is very easy. I can use flow and peace and harmony as a reinforcer. But it also means that, well, first I'm going to let you see here, there's a little reorganization. I put hay behind me just because I was hoping some of this would happen. Cleo comes in, Myrna makes room for her. Wasn't absolutely graceful, but it was pretty easy. And so by putting a limited resource here behind me, I put particularly special hay behind me, and I gave them a limited resource. And limited resources bring up stress. And so when you have stress, you have relationship problems to navigate. And so I was hoping the two of them would do some navigating around this limited resource here, and I would get to talk about it. Because they are fairly emotionally mature, the way they handle problems is with thinking, yielding, or playing. Okay, so they solve problems using good social skills. And that's what tells us that they are fairly emotionally mature. Now, when horses are less mature, when they're young, they are less likely to use positive coping skills when stress comes up. When stress comes up, they're more likely to jump into fight or flight or freeze. Okay, and that's just natural, normal part of growing up. And what I find is young horses depend on having an older, wiser companion who knows how to take their fight or their flight or their freeze and interact with it in thinking, yielding, or playing. So the outcome is positive. So these two mares, Cleo and Myrna, they're fairly mature. They can help each other. If they are in with someone who is younger, that younger horse is going to sometimes go to fight or flight or freeze. And if these guys can respond to that in a playful manner, in a thinking manner, in a yielding manner, stress comes back down. And that is what the more emotionally mature horses or humans can do for the younger horses. So Kristen says, so I guess some old horses with less variety might still be young by solving problems. Yes. So maturity is, so when you have older horses who haven't experienced very much life, they might still be very immature emotionally. Okay, so being mature is a different thing than being old. I also find that some older horses, lose a little bit of maturity as they get old. So there's a sweet spot in the middle of their life where they have all of their mental and emotional capacities working really well. And the way we know that is because when there is a problem, they can play to solve the problem. Or when there's a problem, they can yield and make a little room for their friends to solve the problem. And when there's a problem, they think. Their eyes move, their ears move, their nose moves. You can see them processing it and trying to find a solution. So Myrna's watching the other horses and the people across the paddock. And then you can see Cleo did too. So, you know, that matching behavior shows thinking, okay? The problem was somebody moved over there unexpectedly and it wasn't paying attention. It was a person or a horse. Myrna had to change her focus, look, make sure it was okay. And because Cleo is also fairly mature, she also picked up her head and looked. If we had a very immature horse, okay, they would be more likely to run away when they saw that there was something unexpected happening. Hi, Myrna. You gonna get hay in my hair? So the more mature they are, the more they can use thinking, yielding, playing to solve problems. The more immature they are, the more defensive they're gonna get. They're going to go right to running away, or they're going to go right to fighting against the problem, or they're going to freeze and just do nothing. And so hopefully in a herd, you have a mixture of more emotional horses and less emotional horses, because the ones that are less mature are going to need some help, and they're going to need some help from their more mature companions who have been around, seen things, done different things, and they say, this is not a problem. This small thing that we need to solve, we can think about it, we can make room for each other, and we can play. What happens if we push a little bit? Does it get interesting? Does it get fun? Does it get entertaining? So this is really important when it comes to training for me, because I have Ocasio, which some of you guys know. He is very immature, okay? He's 7 years old, but he has not gained a lot of emotional maturity yet, which means he is very likely to go to fight, flight, or freeze, and he is less likely to act responsibly when there's a problem to solve. So that means someone else has to be responsible. He's not mature enough to be responsible, so therefore I have to be the responsible one. And that's difficult, because if he goes to fight, let's say he kicks at me, I instantly want to protect myself, and I want to kick back. I want to tell him that's inappropriate. I want to tell him never to do that again. I want to be very self-defensive. And that might punish him out of the behavior, which has a certain amount of benefit, but it doesn't help him as much as if I can think enough so that I see it coming and I can do something so that Ocasio doesn't get stuck in that situation where he's overly reactive. I have to think more. I have to yield more. I have to play more. Everything I do has to be better when I'm working with a young horse. And I got this question a couple weeks ago. How do you raise a baby horse? What happens when they want to bite you? This happens often with small foals. And so you have to remember the difference between good social behavior and bad social behavior is if your friends still want to be with you after you behave in that way. Okay, so what I've found is that foals that are raised in a very diverse environment have a lot of things to think about. Okay, and when they have a lot of things to think about, that entertains them enough to keep their stress low. But what I find with young horses is when their stress gets too low and they get bored, it's like they're allergic to boredom. And they bounce out of that boredom into creating chaos. And that means that young horses will do things like they'll stop and they'll freeze in the most difficult place in the paddock until some of the other horses come and push them. Okay? They're relying on the other horses to get them out of freeze. Okay? Or they will kick on the way by. They'll just randomly be walking by and they'll decide to kick another horse. And that behavior, it's not very socially responsible. Nobody wants to spend time with that horse. What they need is friends that are thinking enough. They see that young horse coming. They know that boredom is an issue for that young horse, and they take action before they catapult out of boredom into a really irresponsible action. So Christian says, might there also be a way that Ocasio would find a way himself to feel better instead of kicking you? Could you train this a passive way by thinking better? Yes. So the way out of this with young horses is for us to be less frozen. Okay, so this is another reason I put this hay here. You can see Cleo here, like her ears and her eyes are not moving very much. She's a little bit frozen. Myrna, ears, not moving very much. Okay, they are a little bit frozen. And because they're both frozen, okay, they're both equally frozen, they can agree on this. They still want to spend time together. So it's enough thinking for them. But when you put a younger horse in here, this would be too boring for them. So a younger horse would say, you're not thinking, this is stressful. And the younger horse would start to act badly. So Myrna comes up, ears start to move, not very much. She's in a small amount of freeze, which older, mature horses do. But when you get younger horses in the group, what they need is thinking companions, okay? Ears moving, eyes moving, being aware, being alert, being interactive, okay? If they do not have thinking companions, young horses will take action to break this sort of freeze. They will bite, they will kick, they will be irritating just to get their older companions to think more. Hi, Myrna. Okay. Now, Myrna and Cleo and I, we think this is just fine. This is plenty of thinking. And so, as long as we all agree on it, it is plenty of thinking. Problems in a herd come up when you get different characters that want different things. And a young, immature horse wants to learn things. They want to interact. They want to explore the world. They want a lot of information coming in. So they are allergic to freeze, or they use freeze as a way to irritate other horses into causing action. Okay, it sounds like a contradiction, but if you watch herds, you'll see it all the time. Those young horses will freeze in the worst possible place, and somebody else is going to have to bite them or kick them to get them out of that place. It's not a mistake. They're actually freezing to cause a little chaos, because boredom is something that young horses are not ready for yet. So yeah, exactly, Leanne. It's important that the older companions don't get grumpy or stressed with the younger ones pushing boundaries. So I think it's really good for the older horses to have to stretch as well. Like, they need to think more. But it is interesting, as horses get older, they tend to get stuck in a different way than younger horses are. And there's sort of a sweet spot in the middle-aged horses where they get the emotional maturity to respond to problems with thinking, yielding, and playing, but they still have enough energy to think more than they freeze. As they get older, they have a tendency to freeze a lot, and as long as they're with all similar older companions, everybody thinks that's fine. But yes, those younger horses, Rachel, they like the chaos. They learn from the chaos. They are hardwired to be learning things all the time. And so if we want them to learn in good ways, we are going to have to freeze less and think more. Set their situations up for learning and interaction and engagement without having to go to fight or flight. So, Rachel says, is that really freeze as we understand it in shutdown horses or horses that are stressed or another type? I use freeze as a very broad category, okay? So a lot of other people like to come up with 1,000 different words for every different type of state. And you can do that. But for simplicity, I use freeze as a very broad term. And I find it's very useful to use it as a broad term. So yes, there is a shutdown type of freeze, and the way you know a shutdown type of freeze is that the horse doesn't come out of it very easily. Like, they're very resistant to coming out of it. These horses are in freeze But it doesn't take very much for them to think more. It doesn't take very much to catch their attention. So we know they're not very shut down. It's sort of a voluntary freeze. It's different from the high stress freeze that most people talk about. It is a more comfortable freeze. But I find it's very useful to see both types as freeze with differing intensities. So Christian says they need chaos to learn many things because more variety leads to more safety to adapt to unknown things. Exactly, Christian. So young horses need stuff to learn from. And if they don't get stuff to learn from, they will become difficult. They get bored and then they catapult up into high stress states of fight, flight, and freeze until they get the chaos they need to learn from. So, if we want to be emotionally mature people around young horses, we are going to have to think more. So you can see Cleo change focus there, change focus back. Those kinds of focus changes will calm a young horse. But as soon as you get too frozen, they will get bored and they will start creating chaos. So Christian says freeze in one behavior can be different than freeze due to stress. I believe stress is not a bad thing. Stress is always changing levels. So freeze is always because stress went too high or too low, okay? So in this kind of freeze, stress is very low. These horses are eating, they're very close to sleeping. It's a very low stress freeze. Okay, when stress is too high or too low, you become worse at communicating with someone else. So if you think about eating a lot of food, you're not very good at having a conversation at the same time. That's a very low stress state for some, high stress for others, depending on how fast you're eating. If your stress is very high, you're not going to be a very good communicator either. So we want that functional zone in the middle. Yes, freeze in one behavior is usually more in the low stress freeze category than the high stress freeze. But both of them mean you're not very good at communicating with your friends. Lillian says, so good to have older horses doing a bit of interaction work to keep thinking throughout life, in addition to mixed herds. If different ages, like older people doing mental jobs to keep brain pathways open and fresh, and being good role models, mixing with younger and more immature. Exactly. So I believe when you have mixed ages and mixed maturities, because some middle-aged geldings are not very mature. So when you have mixed ages and mixed maturities, everyone benefits to the degree they can handle it. Okay, so there is going to be rigidity where, they say, I don't want to think more. And then they go into fight or flight to try and defend their right to freeze. So, Christian says, so true, my grandma gets 90 soon and she's still so good in thinking. Yeah. And I think it's very helpful to have younger, sometimes less mature individuals to talk to. So Cleo walked over there. You could see Myrna pick up her head for a second and think about that. That response to change tells us this freeze is very low stress. Okay, it's not a very intense freeze. Thank you, Rachel. I find the way I describe different freezes is just really helpful in terms of deciding how to approach things and how to manage day-to-day living. I'm glad you like this daytime today, Christian. Yes, freeze is one of the biggest things that we don't talk about in horse training because we usually limit it to very high stress situation where horses are about to faint or fall down or completely disappear. And I think that we would be benefited to see the low stress forms as freeze. Because when we can see, Myrna and Cleo are a really good example of a low stress form of freeze. There's just not much thinking going on. It doesn't take very much pressure to get them to think, but they're not volunteering a lot of thinking. So if we had Ocasio in this group, I guarantee you he would be bumping up against these mares a lot to try and get them to think more. Because of his immaturity, he needs a more thinking companion to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to feel like he's getting the education that he needs in life. So a lot of people say young horses need boundaries. They need to know right from wrong. They need to get punished when they have wrong behavior. And I think that when you punish a young horse for bad behavior, you do teach them something. But you are a day late and $1 short. So if you have to punish a horse for bad behavior, what it means is you didn't give them the thing they needed before they... Myrna's gonna share some hay with us. Thank you, Myrna. So, if you punish a horse for bad behavior, it means that you were not thinking enough to work around that bad behavior in the first place. And if you can think enough to set things up for success so that young horses have enough to think about and process and learn from, then they don't have to overreact with fight and flight or freeze. Yes, Myrna's sharing and caring, and now she's going to, seeing I didn't appreciate the hay she gave me, she's going to take it back. Hi, Cleo. Would you like me to hold that piece for you? It's a rather long piece of hay, so I'm going to help her. Hi. I've been sitting in this place for a long time here, and you are starting to see Myrna nudge me a little bit more. Okay, she's doing it in a very playful way. Okay, and that is how an emotionally mature horse is going to suggest to me, I've been sitting in the same place for a really long time. Okay, she's going to suggest to me that maybe I could move somewhere else. Okay, and I don't know if you can see, she's passing me really close. This is a version of play. Okay, when horses play, they push into you in a way that doesn't make you uncomfortable. And playing is the way we solve freeze in an appropriate manner. Okay, and yes, Lillian, this is appropriate across species, human and horses. But if we see that someone is a little stuck, a little frozen, or that young horse is a little bored, being able to push into their space in a way that doesn't get anyone upset is how you solve that before there's a problem. And that is how you raise baby horses without them biting everyone, is you need to give them an environment where their brain is stimulated enough that they don't have to push into someone's space in a way that makes them uncomfortable. We want our babies to play, not fight. And the way we draw that line is to redirect the focus when they're getting a little too high in the stress. Now, this is theoretical. I haven't raised babies since I have understood this work. So this is very theoretical. At some point, I will get a chance to raise baby horses again. Until then, Ocasio will have to be enough. He's plenty immature for me. So the mares have decided they're going to take a little walk. And what was interesting to me is that they both agreed on it. Okay. And this is what I would say is yielding. They're going to go to the water trough. Okay. They went really slowly. They made plenty of room for me to follow. They didn't run away. Okay, this is another way they suggest, Elsa, you've been sitting in the same place for a really long time. We're going to the water trough. Do you want to come with us? Okay, they went very slowly, very gently. I'm not going to take their offer because I'm talking to you guys, but that's another really good example of yielding to try and break someone's freeze. So Manuela says, I have a very intelligent young mare. When she spooks, could it be because I don't challenge her enough? Spooking behavior is generally because their overall stress level is too high. They've frozen or fixated on one thing, and then something else caught the corner of their eye and surprised them. So with a horse that spooks, we have to teach them not to freeze, hyperfixate in one direction. They have to learn to look around, see the world, so the world doesn't surprise them. Yes, it means that you could challenge her more, Manuela, but you need to challenge her in a way that supports her thinking. Okay, it's all about the thinking, the yielding, the playing. Too often when people say, I need to challenge my horse more, they end up doing things the horse hates, so the horse doesn't want to be with them. And remember, if you're doing things your horse hates and your horse doesn't want to be with you, that goes in the fight category, or the flight category, or the freeze category. So you really need to think of things that you can do with your horse that are in the play, the yield, or the think category to help them think more so that life doesn't surprise them. So Rachel says, I look forward to you working with Ocasio and sharing with us the journey with him. For the most part, I'm letting Ocasio grow up now. He's not my focus. He is in the herd with Atlas and Ari, and he's wonderful. I'm very challenged by that immature state, so he's going to teach me a lot. Cleo's coming back to join us. Hi, Cleo. She's going to lick my elbow, share a little of her water with me that she just got at the water trough. Lovely. Hi. Kristen says, see and hear the world that nothing surprises them. Exactly, Christian. When they get really good at thinking and seeing and hearing the world, nothing surprises them and they don't have to spook anymore. So thank you guys for joining me for tea time. I am going to get up. My mares have very politely suggested that I have been sitting here for too long. And they're very emotionally mature, so I don't expect them to go to fight, but they are going to keep nudging me until I'm a little less frozen. But I'm going to answer these questions quick. Lillian says, yielding if the horse intention until shift of thinking state of mind to ask questions. FBT really helps read subtle signs and reinforce the thinking state of mind. Yes. Yielding, playing, thinking. Those are our solutions. We can get as creative as we want, but we know it's yielding, thinking, and playing if the horse still wants to be with us when we're done. So Manuela says she loves to do complicated things like lateral work. Thank you for your statement. Yeah, you just want to find those things that stimulate the thinking, the yielding, and the playing. Yeah, Kristen, I think you're right. Cleo is asking, why I'm not participating more, why I'm just staring at my phone talking. I do love this connection with my girls. Yes, thank you, Regina. Myrna and Cleo are so effortless to be around. It's a really lovely start and end to every day. They don't challenge me as much as the boys do because they know me really well, but they soothe my soul, and that's a good thing. So thank you guys for joining me for tea time. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are in the world. Let me know if you have any questions, and if there's anything you'd like me to talk about for future tea times. Have a wonderful time, and I will see you next week.